Good evening, and welcome to the Fireside Chats. I'm Dr. Quinn. Tonight, we'll be discussing Sweden and Israel's military conscription policy. For my guests, I have Dr. Paolo Leveratto and Dr. Nicholas McDougall. First on the show, I'd like to welcome Dr. Paolo Leveratto. Dr. Leveratto, can you describe for our viewers how the Swedish state came into being?
Well, the Swedish state is actually pretty interesting. They actually broke off from Norway, so it was very peaceful and it was non-violent at all. It was just a clean split from Norway, and they just institutionalized their democracies. They created parliaments, and they still had a monarchy, so it's a constitutional monarchy. And it's pretty interesting how that can just come about peacefully.
Excuse my throat is dry. Can you describe the rationale for the conscription in Sweden?
So, conscription right now in Sweden is actually, they don't have conscription. As of last year, they actually ended the conscription policies. The rationale for that is because Sweden has, they found that there's not really a need for it, because the conscription includes the entire government, entire policy, and because Sweden has been a peaceful country, it hasn't been involved in any world wars, and it's been neutral, so there's no really need for an army. So because of that, the Swedish state instead cut conscription so that they can be able to more specialize those troops. So those troops they can have a few special troops that are extreme, legit, and ready to go.
Interesting stuff, Dr. Leveratto. Can you describe how democracy works in your country and somehow relate it to the conscription policy?
So democracy in Sweden is actually, they're very democratic. They're the second most democratic country in the world, and they actually want to be more democratic. Because the conscription, in some countries, it can actually be seen as non-democratic. Like in Sweden, out of 8,000 soldiers were actually conscripted out of 120,000. So as you can see, it's not really as fair as a lot of people thought. So also women, they weren't mandated to come into the military at all either. So it's not really fair, and it's not really democratic as one would think it would be. So because of this, because they want to be more democratic, they view that conscription isn't the best policy for them.
Very interesting stuff. Let's go to commercial break. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. If you're just joining us now, we're discussing conscription in Israel and Sweden. We just had on Dr. Paolo Leveratto. I'd like to welcome our next guest, Dr. Nicholas McDougall. Round of applause.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Good, Dr. Quinn. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, can you describe for us the historical background in your country that has led up to the formation of the State of Israel?
Well, you see, Dr. Quinn, the background of the Israeli state is very controversial. Marred in war. We gained our independence in 1948, previous to World War II. It was the Haganah military who helped provide stability in the state before independence. Our independence was gained in 1948, and post-independence, the IDF was formed. The IDF is the Israeli Defense Force, and since then, the IDF has promoted a strong military presence in the Israeli state.
It's very interesting, very interesting. How does democracy work in your country, and can you relate that to the conscription policy in Israel?
Well, you see, Dr. Quinn, democracy might not be as stable as many people may assume in our state. And with this instability in our democracy, it provides for conscription. And many of the citizens of our state feel, since we have such an unstable democracy, it is their duty to help provide safety for our country. So on that note, it is up to many of the civilians in the state to join the military, to serve their country, to provide, well, like I said, stability in the Middle East.
Inspiring words. How about the rationale for conscription in Israel? What's that like?
Well, like I said before, marred in controversy and war, we are a state that's been in war since 1940s, every decade. Do the math, that's at least 6 wars up to this point. So on that note, it is very important our military stay strong and stay ready, because war is ready at the drop of a hat. Things are very unstable in the Middle East.
Inspiring words. Let's take another quick commercial break and we'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Just tuning in, you're tuning into the later part of the show. We've been discussing military conscription in Sweden and Israel. And in closing, it seems though as if military conscription in Israel is more needed than so in Sweden, just because Israel has been marred by war and conflict throughout their history, whereas in Sweden we see more of a neutral country, not so much involved in conflict, which doesn't really ask the citizens to go into war. Thank you for tuning into the Fireside Chats. Once again, I'm Dr. Quinn.